What's good, guys? So today we're gonna talk about how we're gonna deal with Drytron post Lightning Overdrive. First thing, let's go over the cards real quick. So they're getting an XYZ, they're gonna get a main deck monster, a generic ritual support. But this card, if you attribute summon a monster for a ritual summon, you can detach appropriate materials from this card instead. You can use this following effect once per turn. If this card is XYZ summoned, you can send one Drytron to the graveyard. And then the last effect is if your opponent activates a spell or trap while you control a machine ritual monster, so the bigger Drytron rituals, you can detach one material and negate it. Three good effects. And essentially, if you guys haven't realized, this is literally Union Carrier. So they ban Union Carrier, bring Fafnir in. So that's fine. That's literally how Konami works these days. So I'm fine with that. Just know this is literally Union Carrier. So Drytron definitely gets a gigantic boost. And then the other card, Diviner of the Heralds, another secret rare. And this essentially is going to help the consistency of the deck. Ever since Ben 10 got hit to 1, it's a little harder for them to get to Ben 10 now. But now, because of Diviner, you can just get to Ben 10. All the Diviner does is send a fairy monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard. So you're going to send Herald of the Arclight, add Ben 10. It has some other level modulation effects. There's going to be plays with Beatrice. It's a tuner. I don't know if they're going to actually abuse the fact that it's a tuner, but starting off, you just need to know those basic two cards because those are the two cards that are going to drop. Before I get into it, I don't know if Drytron will actually be tier 1. I've been debating with my friends whether or not it actually will be. I definitely know Tri Brigade will. Drytron is still a little questionable to me. But as usual, most decks have three ways you can deal with it through side and main deck cards. One way is going to be trying to attack it through turn 0, so hand traps. The second way is board breaking cards, cards that you could draw as a 6 card. And then the third way is going to be trap cards that are good at going first and second. Most of the time, the trap cards are usually only blowouts going first. Some of them can be blowouts going second. But let's get right into it. And with the side deck, you have to remember you want to find as much overlap. Some of these cards are going to be only good against Drytron, so I don't recommend playing it unless you're really that scared. But the first card, Droll and Lockbird. And Droll and Lockbird fills that role that I was just talking about where you want cards that deal with multiple different decks. Why pick a card like the next card I'm about to talk about? But Droll and Lockbird essentially cuts you from searching after you search once. And Drytron, most ritual decks in general are going to search at least 10 times. Drytron searches so many more times than any other deck I've ever seen. They're going to add so many cards. As soon as they start getting going and you don't have a way to deal with the searching, they're going to fill up their field with a crazy board, and they're going to add hand traps to their hands, such as orange light, purple light, whatever they choose to play. So Droll and Lockbird, and it has the overlap that I've been talking about. Cycle Reader, probably even stronger than Droll and Lockbird. I've seen Cycle Reader resolve and you just lose, like Drytron literally can't play. Some of their hands can play, but most of the time this hand trap alone can end their turn. And almost like Droll, but Cycle Reader is just very catered towards only light decks, so only Drytron. I don't know if there's going to be other light decks. You can't really, it's not worth putting this in just to banish a Lord or something. That's why this is my problem. During Drytron format, last format, when Ben 10 was at 3, Union Carrier was there, everybody was on Cycle Reader, but it got to the point where people just stopped playing Drytron because why deal with all these hate cards? So I don't know if Cycle Reader is definitely strong against Drytron, don't get me wrong, it's so strong, but the thing is, you have to remember, you don't know if people are going to be willing to play Drytron as much as Tri Brigade, especially because the Drytron game 1 has always been so strong. The issue has always been game 2 and 3 when you have to deal with the garbage like Cycle Reader and other cards like that. You have to deal with the Drolls. You have to deal with trap cards I'll get into that literally just target Drytron. Then Bell, another card that overlap. Bell's going to be super good into Tri Brigade because it stops Revolt, and Bell's good into all the revive effects. It can hit Preparation of Rites because you can add from Graveyard with that spell. So, and you can hit the ritual spell Drytron Medionis. So there's a bunch of good cards overlap. This is a card that I think is main deck worthy. And then Nibiru is average against everything, but I think it should always be in your side because it catches those combo decks that like or almost rogue decks like Phantom Knights. There's weird combo decks that just die to Nibiru, and sometimes Nibiru plus one other hand trap can just win you the game. Nibiru's not bad. I've never hated Nibiru. It's just like against Dragon Link, it's always felt so subpar because Seal's just getting something else. But I think Nibiru should always still be in the side deck. I usually keep it in the side deck. I always try to make an effort to make sure it's somewhere in my deck because you just never know. The decks that Nibiru is good against are always just blowouts. When you drop this card, you just probably win the game. And then the last card, something that I think looks a little weird, but it goes under the same principle. It's a turn zero card, it's a hand trap, and it has overlap. Impermanence is also going to be really good against Tri Brigade. And you have the overlap now. Now that they have the XYZ, you actually have something to hit. Before, you could hit Carrier, but then after Carrier was gone, it was just like these cards don't do anything. The Drytron's effect all resolves, but almost all the combos now are going to revolve around you having to get to Fafnir. So I think preventing Fafnir with Valor Impermanence is not bad, and the main thing is the overlap. And yeah, so these are all going to be the cards that I think are good turn zero, the hand traps. The next batch of cards is going to be cards you could draw as the 6th card to try to deal with it. The first one is the Segue, Call by the Grave. Call by the Grave is obviously going to be good going first as well. You could set it and hit a bunch of different things when they're going to tribute for costs, such as the Ben 10, such as any of the Drytrons, or when the Drytrons are trying to come out of the graveyard. That's good. Pankratrops Alpha, I think these are just two generic. Drytron fields are most likely going to be some iteration of IP Appaloosa, or the IP will get to the Appaloosa with a Dweller, with a Fool that will summon a Megalith monster from your deck. But the main issue with these board breaking cards, and I think it goes same for Droplets and Dark Ruler right next to it, I think unlike the other decks that I usually talk about, the board breaking cards are actually the weakest cards to deal with Drytron, because Drytron's like interruptions that they set up is too diversified. They're going to add hand traps, they're going to play hand traps. They will never drop their full load onto the field. Their field is going to look scary, but guess what? Their graveyard is still just set up for next turn, and they have Orange Lights in hand, Eva in hand, and they might have whatever hand traps that they choose. Their combos require only 2-3 cards. If you're going to actually play a Drytron deck that's putting everything on the field, I think that's definitely not the way to play it. From everything I've seen, it's close to a control deck, but a little bit more explosive, but you're going to have two different things to worry about. So I don't think just because you're going to Dark Ruler their field, Droplets their field, you'll deal with some of their boss monsters, but if your deck is just going to die to a Orange Light or just hand traps in general, then the board breaking cards is definitely not the wave. The board breaking cards do have the overlap that you want, especially if Dragon Link stays, unlike Drytron. Dragon Link, the best way to deal with Dragon Link is probably board breaking cards. So you see how it differs with these different methods that you choose to play depending on your deck, depending on what deck you're playing against. But yeah, Drytron, I think the best way to deal with Drytron is probably the turn zero hand traps. But yeah, so the other card, Droplets, Dark Ruler, I definitely do not like playing the cards that I have to draw as a 6 card against Drytron, just because everything's so diversified. That's my issue with it. But the last batch of cards is the last way to deal with the Drytron deck is trap cards that are good going first, second. A bunch of them are actually not that good going second. That's my issue with it. Trap cards is probably weaker. Drytron has always been super grindy into trap decks. Drytron can play into traps very well, unless it's a trap, unless you have to deal with like some of the crazier traps. But if it's just normal traps like Strike, Torrential, they just slowly grind you out. So if it's not a targeted trap card, you're probably going to lose. They have access to Zeus. They can make it very easy. But the trap cards that I will personally recommend, if you're actually going to go out of your way to target it, because I played some of this when Drytron first dropped, I remember this. Light Imprisoning Mirror negates all light monster effects activated in the field or in the graveyard. So this is kind of good going second, because they'll have their graveyard. So if you have this trap card paired with some other traps to deal with the whole field, then yeah, it works. Mask of Restrict, they already got their combo through, but it can still be okay. If you go first, yeah, these cards are going to be blowouts. That's the advantage to approaching a deck with trap cards. If you win the roll, if you win the 50-50, you have the chance to win the whole game. Mistake is also okay going second, because they're going to start adding anyway on their turn 3, 4, 5. And going first, this is definitely a blowout. And then Barrier as well. I think Barrier is really shitty. I know people really like it, but I think it's so weak. I think it's okay going first. It's really bad going second, because they already have the field. So I don't know. There's definitely other trap cards, but the trap cards is it has to go. Trap cards is the weakest way to deal with it, and then the board breaking cards, and then the best way to deal with it has to be the turn zero hand traps. But I don't even know if it's worth putting so much of your side deck slot to any of these like dedicated hate cards for Drytron. Only time will tell as we come near close to the set. It's going to drop in 2 weeks. A lot of people are definitely hyped. I'm going to have a deck list for the deck itself very soon. And then, guys, let me know if there's other cards I missed that we could possibly play. Leave a comment, like, subscribe. I'll definitely have more videos like this talking about how we can deal with certain decks that are coming out. But yeah, Drytron, the other big deck from Lightning Overdrive.